Whenever a rig is attached to a character, it doesn't work the way it needs to for quality animation. We have a rig on a vector character. If you have access to the working files, you can go ahead and open rigvector.anime, and we'll begin the finessing from just the basic rig that's already pre-built. This character has been created with all the body parts on their own layer. If I double click on the bone vector layer and open this up, we'll see some options. And when we come over to bones, we'll see that there is an automatic option that's enabled called flexible binding. And there's also something called allow nested layer control, which you will always want to leave on, I think. It allows you to go ahead and create groups inside a bone layer and still have the bones affect those groups. Didn't used to be that way, and it's been updated. You can turn that off if you want to, but I'll suggest leaving it on. Now, one way to remember flexible binding, or I'll choose OK. When you come over to the bone menu, we'll see that we have flexi-binding here. Think of flexi as squishy. And that's exactly how our character behaves right now. With the bone layer selected, I can come up to my bone manipulation tool. We see that we've got these areas of strength right here. Specifically, if you come over to this tool, the bone strength right here. If I move any of these, we see we get this kind of squishy movement going on. It's okay and may be desirable, but we get some kind of funny bending going on. Now, this is the point where we begin finessing characters to get them to work better together. If this arm was a continuous piece of artwork, I could get away with having flexi binding on it, and as we learned in the bone section, creating a special smooth joint bone right here. But this has been constructed so that I can do things like have the arm bend at the elbow and have the hand cross in front of the forearm, hiding it. That's a process in the art world called foreshortening that allows you to see one object in front of another. You couldn't do that real well if we had one piece of artwork right here. So let's look at some ways to finesse this so it works a little bit better. I'll have to stop right here and say, there is no best way to go ahead and finesse a rig. There is only in the context of how you plan on animating your character. So let's look at some of the pathologies of the bones themselves. We'll continue to work with flexibinding on this side, and we'll explore some other options on the other side. Coming over to our bone strength tool right here, these envelopes around the bones, whichever bone is selected, the envelope shows red, shows you the area of influence this bone has on the underlying artwork, including nested artwork. If I click and drag to the left, that area of influence goes down. So let me go ahead and reduce this. Why would you do this? Well, when I move this arm, I really don't want it affecting the character's neck up here. So I'm going to reduce the area of strength of that bone. When I come back to the bone manipulation tool now and select, say, this one on the elbow, I can get some bending going on right here. I have all the benefits of having multiple layers, so I can do foreshortening or more complex types of animation, and it's not affecting the character over here. Obviously, I would want to create a action item, a smart bone here to prevent this kind of strange bending I've got going on, or come up and use the create smooth joint option that we've got that we covered in the bones menu. But this is the kind of squishy binding that I'm talking about. There's another way to finesse the rig, and that has to do with binding bones to certain layers. I can actually select all these bones at the same time. I'll select those three. I'm going to reduce the strength by clicking and dragging left. I can make it bigger if I went right. But I'm going to reduce the bone strength to 0 on all those things. But this time what I'm going to do, this is the character's right side, is I'm going to bind these bones to specific layers. So let's do that. To the character's right arm upper, I'm going to select that. And we have a limited bone palette over here, and one of the options is bind layer. So I'll go ahead and bind the layer to the bone that's selected. Let me highlight that first. I need to select the bone I want to bind. When I come to right arm lower, I'll select this bone, and then come to the right hand and select the bone that's inside there. When I come back to the top layer now of the bone vector, I can highlight that, grab the bone manipulation tool now, and when I move this, we can see that I get a little motion going on. Oh, it looks like I've got a leftover hand there from when I put this together. And this is the point where I would want to come in and maybe round this out down here. And there's another little option we'll take a look at in an upcoming movie called patching that can make that work a little bit better. Nobody wants a character with these lines drawn in, and that's something we can deal with. But the difference between flexi binding now is that we get this flexi and squishy looks here, and we get this very segmented look right here when we work with bind layers. Also, for super concise types of binding, you can come down and use another option when we select a layer like the right arm upper called bind points, and that's over here. If I was to select specific points on the character right here, with that layer selected, I can actually come over and bind some of those points to the nearest bone if I want to do that. I would have to select that first and work with it that way. This feature has been covered in the bones section when we look at that. So we've got the ability to control and finesse the character and the rig depending on the nature of motion that we want.